I think it would be a cool Instagram status too. New Odysseus. I also really want to live in Belarus. It's just quite difficult there now. A criminal case has been opened against me, and my father is constantly invited to talk with the investigator. I always felt poor in Belarus, now I feel poor in Switzerland. It always seemed to me that Belarus is a part of Europe. I know that my book was read in Belarusian prisons and passed from cell to cell.
Hello. Hello, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
What does this mean here, Grosse Bühne?
That's the main stage. This is the Basel Theatre. There's a large opera stage here, a ballet, and there's also the Schauspiel, where in fact all theatrical productions are performed, what we call a drama theatre. You can also dance a little.
If I could dance like them, I would be glad to, but it would look ridiculous.
We're in a theatre, my favourite theatre, where one of my favourite opera directors, Christoph Marthaler, works and often directs. I adore him. I cry at all his performances. And I think it's wonderful when you can go out, walk 10 minutes from your home and see your favourite director. That's a great honour and privilege. I love Basel very much, and I love this place very much.
Я очень люблю Базель и очень люблю это место.
You love this director, and you love the theatre. That's why we're here today. Well, since we're already talking about culture, what do you, a Belarusian writer, have in common with, for example, ancient Greece? I had this thought, maybe it's strange. What do you think you have in common?
What do I, a Belarusian writer, have in common with ancient Greece? I think there's great drama and catharsis in every book of mine. I don't know, I've never thought about it. I can't give a quick answer to that.
Let me tell you what comes to my mind. It seems to me you have a lot in common with Ulysses from the Odyssey. A hero with a fairly strong character, with strong convictions, who's forced to wander for 10 years. This is someone who tells his story. He has been away for 10 years and has overcome various challenges. Now, if you were writing this epic, where would you start your Odyssey?
I think it would be a cool Instagram status too. New Odysseus, Odysseus 2.0. One of my characters is Odysseus 2.0. In Ostrog, I write about a veteran of the Chechen War and a detective who goes to investigate crimes in a prison. I'm writing that he's just Odysseus 2.0. He's similar to me in some ways. I think it's a great honor and privilege for me to be compared to Odysseus. I think I fall short. I don't know. I'd start the story by saying that, first of all, I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to go on this journey, and often you become a hostage to your own dream. For example, in the last book, something happened to me that, unfortunately, what I'd planned many years ago began to happen to me. And in this sense, it's as if you're catching up with what happened to you, although you once came up with this Back to the Future idea a long time ago. I'd probably start by describing my life in Belarus and how my mismatch with my own country forced me to go on this journey. But it's like I always tell myself, that I'm on a very long business trip. I didn't have the feeling when I lived in Belarus that there is a Belarus and there is a Europe, and it's somewhere far away. It always seemed to me that Belarus is a part of Europe. I always told myself that I'm like a football player who grew up in Belarus, then went to play in the championship, somewhere in the Italian or the German championship. It's as if I also knew that I would become a European writer who would be somewhere in Belarus and in Europe, and his books would be translated in Belarus and in Europe. The only downside now is that I can't go home.
So you've never said, I'm in exile.
I've never said to myself, I am in exile. Although from time to time I receive a notification that I am in exile. Just yesterday, news came that I was also put on a wanted list in Russia, and this is like a reminder. Even when I talk to my therapist, she recently remembered, she says, well, Sasha, you are also an emigrant, and this is a lot of stress for a person. I realized that I've never even thought about it, that I was also an emigrant.
What will they say about us? When I say about us, I'm talking about those who don't live in their own country, who moved to Switzerland, who left Belarus or Russia in 30 years.
About our generation of immigrants? Don't know. I'd like us not to be generalized, because we all have different stories. We all have different reasons why we left. I'd like people to say that we never forgot our home, that we tried to do everything to return, everything possible, and made Europe a little better. Many prisons have my books. To avoid returning them to the library and having them confiscated, people who leave immediately pass them on to their cellmates, and they pass them on. And this is really cool. People who are in pre-trial detention centres, not in prisons, during the protests in 2020, wrote to me and said that they had read the book out loud and passed the ex-son from cell to cell. This is actually one of the most important awards I've ever received in my life. This is just super cool. We're in one of my favorite places. I hang out here often. Earlier, I mean in the mornings, when there aren't so many people here, it's a kind of place, not so much of strength, but a place where you can admire Basel and think about everything. About a new book, about old ones, about what worked or what didn't work in them, about what you can do next. Usually, when you finish a book, you think that you will never write again.
Do you think so now?
I'm starting to think that now. But every time you think that, it's like you set yourself some kind of bar for yourself and jump higher than you could. And you realize that you're tired. In The Elephant, I wanted to descend into hell, to go there. And at the end of the book, it seems to me that this is happening. And sometimes you understand that you are not ready for your own books. And after some time, you understand all that complexity that you lived through when you were in a book for 3 years. You don't seem to get tired. And then all this fatigue falls on you, including some kind of emotional fatigue. A reader came to me and she said, I read your book, Return to Ostrog, and I know how it ended. I say, but even I don't know how it ended. I'll tell you now. And she began to tell me how my book ended. And in this sense, it seems to me, yes, readers always know better what you wrote about.
You said that what has happened in The Elephant, you said that that has already happened to you.
This is both important and unimportant. On the one hand, it's important when all this really happens to you. It seems to me that back at university, in the philological department, we were taught that a writer is a kind of rubbish pit into which everything is dumped, a basket like that, 24 hours a day. And then you take something out of this basket, and something appears in the text. And sometimes you know what you intentionally pulled out of that basket, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you write down some things that happen to you, and sometimes you predict some things. Because in The Elephant, it turned out that the ending of the book and some things that happened to the main character were first thought up and conceived by me and described in the synopsis, and then they started happening to me.
и задуманы, описаны в синопсисе, а потом они начали со мной происходить.
The main character is vulnerable, exposed. Your parents are still in Belarus, right? And that's what happened to the main character. The main character's parents could be pressured because of some of their vulnerabilities. And as far as I understand, that's also your personal story. What is happening with your parents now? Can you communicate with them? How do you communicate with them? And how do they see, look out, watch out for you? Or do you have some other type of communication with them?
My parents are not essentially but truly held hostage in Belarus because they have no documents and cannot leave Belarus. At the same time, a criminal case has been opened against me, and my father is constantly invited to talk with the investigator. And I think my dad already has Stockholm syndrome because he says, "You have a very good investigator. She's on your side." I say, yes, that's why they opened a criminal case, to make sure that I'm a really good guy. And they have some interactions there, it seems to me, already between Dad and the investigator, because, for example, she recently asked whether Sasha is proud of Belarus, to which Dad says, yes, and it would be nice if Belarus also began to be proud of Sasha. But this is some kind of attempted joke about the fact that something terrible is happening. But overall, my parents are truly held hostage. Every time there is some big interview or something where I allow myself to simply tell the truth about what is happening in Belarus, people send their regards, and in general, it's some kind of...
Are they being threatened?
My parents are not under threat now, and they live quite peacefully, one might say. But everyone understands that they can come and arrest you any day.
Would they like you to stop writing, stop meeting Western politicians, stop suggesting they increase sanctions? But in my opinion, you haven't invented any new tools to pressure the regime. That is, sanctions against Belarus have been in place for some time now.
I think they don't care at all what I write, and they've never read my books. The people who are putting all this pressure on me, I think it's of course important to them that I simply do not speak out in the European press, that there are no interviews, that I do not speak at the Council of Europe or somewhere, and do not meet politicians at the Foreign Ministry. I think there's some resentment about the cancellation of the World Hockey Championship, to which I contributed exactly as much as other Belarusians, no more, no less. But maybe I was just describing this in the European press. There's a grievance at the Red Cross, at the Belarusian one for sure, but I'm preventing them from receiving money from the Red Cross. And in this sense, yes, of course, they want me to leave and keep quiet. That's why a criminal case is opened, and that's it. They recorded with my father. They forced him to record a video in which he condemns my activities, but it's not yet been published. I think they are saving it for something important. The trial will take place. They'll decide there how many years I should serve in prison. I have a good charge. Now everyone is measuring themselves by charges, shameful and not shameful, and I have a good charge. Article 130, Part 3. The preamble states that the accusation is that I, through literature, called for mass protests in Belarus. Dad doesn't want to go anywhere because he's lived there his whole life, and he hasn't done anything wrong to this country. Then why should he answer when he's told to tell his son to shut up? He says, I'm over 60 years old. My son is 40 years old. How can I tell my son to shut up? And in this sense, it's a strange conversation. And he wants to live in Belarus. I also really want to live in Belarus. It's just quite difficult there now, because we know that even if I go to Russia, they'll immediately hand me over to Minsk. I have a free ticket for sure.
Бесплатно довезут в Минск. У меня есть один бесплатный билет, точно.
You and I talked about the Odyssey at the beginning. There, while he was wandering, Penelope was waiting for him at home in his native Ithaca. Who is waiting for you at home? And what would you call home anyway?
Я не знаю, это хороший вопрос.
I don't know. This is a good question and a difficult question. Fortunately, or unfortunately, nobody is waiting for me now. Or maybe she is there, my Penelope, but I don't know about her. Maybe she's waiting, but in any case, I don't know about her. I don't know about my home. It's very difficult because I feel like Switzerland has become my home now. I've been living here in Basel for 3 years. When I come back here from a lot of performances, I'm happy to come back to Basel.
I
understand that I'm now returning somewhere to my apartment, where I have books, where I have an office, where I write. But this is not, it's still not home. This is not the water in which I'm used to living. And in this sense, I understand that there will be no other home except Minsk.
In reference to the Odyssey, it seems that you too have changed a lot. And when you go back to Belarus, maybe people won't recognize you either and will see you differently. Maybe you haven't become quite one of us here, but there you will be definitely a stranger.
I don't know. I feel very much at home because I often perform in different cities in Europe and a lot of Belarusians come to meet me. And I feel this connection, perhaps because these are also people who have lost their home. And these are also emigrants. There is some kind of communication. I don't know how the Belarusians who remained inside the country will receive me, but something tells me that it's unlikely to be with hostility. One can imagine that it would be some kind of life now in two countries, because I have a lot of work here now. In Switzerland, in Germany, in Austria, where more books are sold than in Russia and Belarus. And last year, at the Cannes Film Festival, I was already a Swiss writer.
Does this make you happy?
No, there's no emotion towards this, because it seems to me that these are some kind of labels that have been attached to me.
You wanted to be a European writer.
Well, I feel like a European writer, but in this sense, a Belarusian Swiss writer, a Swiss Belarusian writer. It's not important at all. It matters what you write and what you write about.
What does a Belarusian writer live on? And how do you live in an expensive country such as Switzerland?
First of all, it's simple for me. I always felt poor in Belarus, now I feel poor in Switzerland. And in this sense, nothing has changed in my life. I live on royalties from books, which have now been translated into 20 languages. I live on speaking fees, because every time I speak and promote books, I get paid to speak. I live on the royalties from the articles I write in the European press, when I write in the Allgemeine Zeitung or the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, or all over Europe. I write articles very often and I get money for it. Plus, from time to time, I get some awards. And like all writers, I apply for stipends. When you start writing a novel, you apply for a stipend. In Switzerland, if you have a residence permit and you're living here, you can apply for example, there is the wonderful Pro Helvetia that helps authors, and you can submit your project. There is some kind of money that is collected little by little from everywhere.
How do you think the dictatorships of Lukashenko and Putin will end?
I think Lukashenko's dictatorship will end the same way any dictatorship ends. The issue is that some dictatorships last longer than others. We see that dictatorships also learn. Not only do people learn to overthrow dictatorships, but dictatorships learn to stay alive. Dictatorships learn to correct their mistakes, just as society learns to correct its mistakes. You asked when you last felt freedom. And wow, when I talk to my friends who are now in Kiev, or who are in Dnipro, or have returned from somewhere, come from Ukraine, I meet them in Europe, and I feel some kind of boundless freedom that lives in them. And that delights me and amazes me. Some kind of freedom that can sometimes scare you because you're from Belarus, where they treat freedom differently. And sometimes it seems to you that maybe this is too much freedom, an ultra freedom that they have. Just yesterday, my friend and I were talking about this, about what I think is the fundamental contribution that Charlie Hebdo made, precisely because these people showed that we can joke about everything, for everything, and at this moment we are defending your freedoms. We joke about things you don't joke about, and I think this is true. And I understand that at some points I probably wouldn't have had the courage to joke like that. I wouldn't have the courage. I'd like to. I think that's what I try to do in my books. I think I'm trying to go as far as I can in my choice of topics, in freedom of form, in freedom of how the book is written, and what I want to say. And I admire the courage of these people.
Have you ever thought that humor, for example, about Putin and Lukashenko, could reduce the degree of tragedy and perhaps shift attention?
Yes, that's a good question. But I think we have to make jokes about them all the time because they want to be dragons. They want to be evil. And I think we have to show that they are, of course, dragons and evil, but they are also very comical characters. And that takes the fear out of people, allows them to... During the protests in Belarus, we laughed a lot at Lukashenko, and this really irritated him. And we see, understandably, how he took revenge for this. But it seems to me that this is something important that allows the country not to turn into North Korea.
What smell in Switzerland reminds you of home?
I
think the smell we smell now, which is grass, because I used to play football a lot. The smell of a football field, although we played on artificial fields all our lives, but it's like the smell of grass reminds me of spring now. I think something else will come up, but for now it's probably grass.
There are several types of writers. Those who write from some kind of moral position, and those who simply write fiction.
Books about love.
Books about love. I don't know, perhaps there is some other name for them. Is it necessary to say that some books are more important than others and we should keep only those who teach us something, who direct us somewhere? And these books about love, they are something...
Your question is about people who are silent and about authors who justify their silence by saying that there are certain eternal themes. That one war will end, another war will begin. And there is it more important to talk about love, or is it more important to talk about the problem of fathers and children, or about our place in the world, and that wars are somewhere on the periphery of our lives? If you find yourself in Geneva, in the square in front of the Palais des Nations, you will see how many wars are happening everywhere now, and how people are trying to pay attention to them, as if we only focus on those wars that are close to us, that we can feel their breath.
Why was it important for you not to receive refugee status? Was it not to depend on the state?
Probably because I never wanted to be a refugee.
You said, I don't drink anymore. Then why don't you drink anymore?
I don't drink anymore because I've had my fill, because I had to stop, because I've had a lot of wine in my life, and now I'm boxing. And I wouldn't have got through a single workout if I'd continued drinking wine the way I did before. It's just that at some point in your life you realize that that's enough. This no longer helps you write or live.
No song will change the world, and maybe no book will change the world. But this doesn't mean that they don't have to be written.
I know that after reading, or I know that my book was read in Belarusian prisons and passed from cell to cell, I know that after reading my book, several European families came to Belarus and adopted children who now live in Europe.
которые сейчас живут в Европе. Будто бы пропаганда...
Propaganda would say that because of your books, our children are being taken away, and they don't live in wonderful orphanages, but in European families.
в европейских семьях. Но ты понимаешь, что книга...
But you understand that a book can inspire you to do something. I receive a huge amount of feedback from people for whom what I write is important, who say that my books help them.
Говорят, что мои книги им помогают.
Maybe they often hurt people or make them experience emotions that they wouldn't want to experience. And that's why they always ask me to write at least one book with a happy ending. I think all my books have a happy ending too, because they are open. And in that sense, I believe that it can make an impact. And maybe it will be that one person who then does something important.
When was the last time you said, oh, this is real freedom, when you thought, this is real freedom?
I always feel freedom here in Europe, fundamentally, in the sense that in the 3 years that I've been here, and last year I performed in, I think, 60 cities. And before that, there were some years when I had 100 performances a year in different cities. Every third day I was somewhere and performed. Sometimes you have several performances in one day. And in this sense, I think, in 3 years, I showed my passport 2 or 3 times. In that sense, I feel freedom, just freedom of movement. When I go for a run in the morning here in Basel, run for a few minutes into France, run across the bridge into Germany, return to Switzerland, I feel freedom. And for me, as a person who lived in Belarus, when it was always necessary to get visas to fly somewhere for 2 weeks, I appreciate it every time. I say, wow, this is freedom.